Well, hello and welcome to Conversations with Lightworkers and Angels. Today we're
And
going
ETs, don't forget ETs.
ETs, galactic. We love everything in the universe. Um, Today we're going to talk about a book called Radical Forgiveness by Colin Tipping, and this group of Darryl, Vik, and Christina and I have all been using the tools within the book and the worksheets. And we found them to be profound. We've had a lot of insight from it. So today we're going to kind of discuss some of the tools in the book, some of the deeper concepts in the book, and our personal experiences with using the worksheets. Um, so thank you for all being here today and for working on your radical forgiveness. So I I'll briefly say that the tools, the first tool is you tell the story and then you embellish and feel the feelings, and then you perfect the story and you go deep in inquiry, and then you reframe the story, and then you use integration practices. So this is an alchemical process. It is a deep spiritual cleansing of your energetic field. And we do this work for ourselves, our families, and for all the energy within us and all around us. And, you know, I personally use the form to go back to, and I'll start with my first story. I had I had I decided, because I've only been working on this about a week, but I've worked on forgiveness before on a couple of these issues. But one, I decided to investigate my romantic relationships. And I went back to my first husband, and I got married when I was 17. He was an alcoholic, a drug addict, and violent. And I have rarely shared that because I was embarrassed. He actually ended up in jail. He shot someone. We had a baby together. I did not stay married to him very long. I left him. I stood up to him. I said, I'm not going to raise my child with this monster. But I think it created deep insecurity in my romantic relationships. Um, and it goes even deeper than that. But so I did the tool on this uh, relationship, and I shifted all the way from blaming to taking full responsibility for creating this in my life. And then I got to appreciation because I shared with Vik, one of the things that I found, I became a social worker. I help people get out of these situations. So it was a very empowering experiences if I will shift from the victim lens to a powerful creator. So I acknowledge, take full responsibility. I created the story. I can tell the story from a victim or from a creator. But so anyway, you shift all the way to gratitude and love and appreciation. And then you integrate that into all of the relationships that you've ever had. So, that I felt like it was powerful. I also felt like I was holding on to a few things, and I've had a few memories come up that I had buried and forgotten. And so that was one of the things that I used these tools for. And I don't know if anybody else would like to share. Christina?
Yeah, I'll just kind of share my personal experience with this book. Like this book first came into my reality like 10 years ago. And I remember reading it and trying to do the worksheets. and like having an intellectual understanding of it. And like I was working around trying to shift my feelings around my father. Um, I blamed him a lot for a lot of my like issues that I developed, and just blamed him for my upbringing because, you know, he was very like strong disciplinarian. He had an alcohol problem, and just created a lot of fear in me as a child. And so as an adult, and I went through like many relationships in my young adult life where there were a lot of these patterns that would come up that had to do with like my father. And so I was really angry with my father. I felt like he gave me all these problems and issues, and I didn't know how to have healthy relationships and um, all that kind of stuff. And so like this book was introduced to me about 10 years ago, and I remember trying to do some of the processes, and I could intellectually think like, okay, yeah, from like a, you know, a soul's perspective, you know, he gave me these lessons, but like and you know, this is part of my like soul's journey in this lifetime. But I didn't fully feel appreciation for him. I didn't fully at the time didn't fully forgive him because I still felt like no, but these are still issues in my life that I struggle with, and he's still the like at fault. And so I held on to it for, you know, even though I tried to forgive, it still didn't fully sink in for me. And I knew this stuff kind of like I mentioned intellectually, and like it was all in the back of my mind for many years. And I've, you know, I've done a lot of spiritual studies since then, including, you know, the Joshua work. And so I've always known this, but it wasn't, I listened, and then it was about like 2 or 3 years ago. The actually Jessica recommended the book again to me, the Radical Forgiveness book. And because her and I were doing some deeper work around my father. And I listened to the audio version of it. And I remember I was sitting listening to it, and I had gone through it pretty quickly because I had remembered reading it, you know, like a decade ago. But there was something about, I guess I was vibrationally ready at the time or something, where when I was listening to it in the audio version, I got to towards the end of the book where the author just basically spoke about how the, you know, these people in your lives that like are like the transgressors, or like the ones that give you the lessons, are actually like angels in disguise, and they're
Yes.
actually giving you your biggest gift of your lifetime. And I remember there was something that just hit me of like this download, this epiphany. And I recognized on this soul level, my father loves me so deeply that he would be willing to play this role for me so that I could have these lessons to come to this greater understanding of from the spiritual perspective, so that I could play this role as a spiritual teacher in my lifetime, like this lifetime. He was the one who gave me the greatest gift of this lifetime so that I could fulfill my purpose and my role here as a spiritual teacher and coach. And it like hit me so hard, it dropped me to my knees. Like I literally fell to the ground crying, went out and laid in the grass, I don't know, for a couple hours, just sobbing, crying, couldn't believe how much resistance and blame and projection that I had held against him for so long. And we had kind of been estranged for about 20 years at this point. Him and I didn't have like a good relationship. And then when I had this epiphany, I just couldn't believe. I mean, it all served its purpose, but like when it finally hit me, I thought, oh my gosh, like he's been all these 20 years, like he's been in this suffering because him and, you know, me and him hadn't been close in a long time, and he felt like his daughter hated him, and you know, he had supposedly suffered in order for me to finally come to this realization. And when it hit me so hard, I couldn't like just I actually could see how much on a soul level my father truly truly loves me, like deeply. And I knew it. And ever since then, like I now approach my father in a different light now. And I have my interactions with him are much more loving. And, you know, we're still working towards a healthy relationship, but even if it never becomes the ideal, like I know on a soul level my father loves me so deeply,
Yeah.
and it's my perspective of him is completely shifted, and it's because of this book. And
Yeah.
I have a deep love for my father. So
Oh.
that's just kind of my personal experience with it.
Okay. Well, thank you. I mean, that's what we're going for by using the tools in the book. And
Hmm.
how much now you can appreciate the people that created those gifts, I mean, they agreed to be
Hmm.
in your life and you agreed to work with them in this lifetime.
Yeah. Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so, but love is why we're here. And, to learn to accept things that have happened in the past and just feel love for every single thing in your life. That that is what the whole spiritual thing is about, is
Hmm.
learning to be okay with what's happening and what has happened. So,
Yeah.
okay,
Hmm.
thank you. That was a beautiful story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Carol?
It was a wonderful experience through this book.
Yes. Thank you.
Why don't you go next, Vik? Because if I start, I might not stop. So you go first.
So I want to start with this really cool synchronicity that happened when with the recommendation. So it was Monday morning. I was driving my kids to school. I was going to drop them off to school, and my phone was kept in the phone holder that's on the windshield of my car. So it's in a position where my kids can see the screen of the phone when it's on the holder. And Tammy's message came in with this book recommendation, and like, hey Vic, you should probably, this is a great book. Daryl just recommended this to me. I think you should read this. And as soon as that message came, I didn't even see the notification. I just heard the chime. I was driving. My 5-year-old who's sitting in the back goes, Dad, God just messaged you something. And I was like, what? And he goes, yeah, look, God's texting you. And there's nothing in the message. It's just Tammy's name. He can't read. He's 5 years old. He can't read anything. So it's just Tammy's message, and it's like the preview of the text, like, "Hey Vic, you want to check this book out?" And even my 10-year-old is looking at him and like, "What? God's texting, Dad? What are you saying?" And he's like, "Yeah, look, God's texting you." I said, "Okay, fine." So I dropped them off, and I looked, and of course, it was Tammy's text. I was like, "Okay, I'm probably supposed to read this book then." If my kid's saying that, there's something in it for me. So I got the audio book, and I listened to it. So for people who want to listen to the audiobook, it's 3 hours long, so it's not that long of a listen. And the author speaks really slow, so if you speed it up, it's even shorter than 3 hours. But it's a very easy book to read. It's not complicated at all. It's very, very simple, straightforward. And for people who are from the Joshua community, they'll find there's a lot of similarity between what the book is talking about and what Joshua talks about. And the form is kind of like a more expanded version of the manifestation event form that we do. It kind of it's more of like like a handheld approach of the limiting beliefs for the manifestation event form. But having said that, so I listened to that book. It was really, really, it's like I could feel the shift in the way I had processed a lot of things in the past. So I sat down with the form, I got the worksheet and I sat down with it, and I did one for a situation that's going on with work, which I'm not going to go into. But the other one that I did do was for my high school bully. So this was a guy who didn't physically bully me, but his bullying was more mental in the sense, and uh my like the it was when I was in the ninth grade and the 10th grade that I experienced most of the bullying. And this is also the time where like I'm like 15, 16, 17, kind of trying to understand what the world is, where I am in the world, what is my relationship with other people around me. It's kind of one of those moments when you're really trying to figure that out. And this is the time where he bullied me to an extent where I was completely alienated. I had no friends in high school. People wouldn't talk to me. I was the guy like, oh, don't talk to him. He's not, it's not a, like, just not, don't talk to him. He's a weirdo and stuff like that. So I pretty much had very few friends growing up. Like at least in those two years that he bullied me, I didn't have a lot of friends. So I had to do a lot of processing for that. So anyway, so I did the limited the did the worksheet on him, and it was hard at first, but once I started doing the reframing, once I got to the reframing aspect of the form, I started to understand like, okay, this is, I see, I now, it got me to a point where I was able to see the role that he has played in my life because I understand what he did. I understand how it's the place where I am in my journey, especially with my relationships with people, with my own wife, with my kids especially. And it's not a coincidence that this was also the week that my kids were talking about bullying because now they're also experiencing that. They're 10 and 5 and they're in school. So now this week we've had instances with that happening where they're getting bullied and they're talking to me about like, Dad, how do we manage this? How do we handle the bullying?
Mm.
And it was just everything falling into place. And I get it. I get what's going on over here. I get how that bully in my life helped me by the advice that I gave my kids with regards to their bullying. After I was done talking to my kids, I felt so empowered. I was like, wow, that's amazing. Like I could talk to my kids about this, and I wasn't talking from a place of fear or control or
Mhm.
any of those things. I was talking from a place of empowerment with my kids. I told my 10-year-old, like, if you do face a situation like this, don't go into attack mode. You don't need to go into attack mode. All you need to do in that moment is like draw your boundaries. Like make sure your boundaries are known to this other kid. Like, hey, we're not doing this. We are not going to hurt each other. You're not going to hit me. This is I don't want to indulge in this anymore. And just walk away. Just walk away from there. You don't have to do anything. But at the same time, you don't have to fight back. You don't have to argue. You don't have to do any of those things if you don't want to. If that makes you feel uncomfortable, just get out of the situation. Just do that. And the beautiful thing in all of this is he's been able to do that not for himself, not just for himself, but he was able to, after this situation, he was also able to stand up for some of his other friends who were getting bullied by doing this exact thing.
Mhm.
And I realized like he the empowerment my boy must be feeling in that moment.
Uh-huh. That's right.
So I understand
Yeah.
why that happened. I
Right.
understand. I
Right.
see it from that reframing point of view. I get it now.
Yeah. It's
That this
great.
is what this was designed
That's right.
for me to get to this point where be that dad
Uh,
and talk to my kids about this situation. Because when I needed help, when I was looking for help in that situation, I had none. I had no support at
yeah.
that time. I was on my own,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Well, thank you. That is a great story. Something almost all kids have to go through. Uh, yeah, I was bullied some, but not a lot, but it still happens, you know, and but that's a great story. Thank you. And thank you for reading the book and for listening to the book. um, Darryl?
I was referred to the book by Christina about a year ago. I absolutely loved the book, but I absolutely learned nothing from it. Everything that was in that book, I've actually learned through other books and other authors, but with different focus. What that book did, though, was it took all these other things that I've learned before and organized it in a way with a forgiveness lens.
Yes.
In other words, like soul planning, pre-life planning, that there are books about that really explain that in detail. There are books about the things that lead you to forgiveness. It's just that his book was just ideally for organizing it in a way through a lens of forgiveness that really gave you concrete steps of how you if you want to work on forgiveness. That was like a focused tunnel vision, perfect scope, surgeon input into that topic. So that's what I thought was really, really great about the book. And then I went out and bought all his other books too. But yeah, I mean, it was just great the way that he was able to take that focus of forgiveness and zoom it in there. That being said, I do want to get into nitty gritties of the book because just for the viewers to understand, basically the premise is that we all got to understand that there are really two parts of ourselves. There are our inner self, and then there is our ego self, or our self that's having the life that we're having now, and that our inner self is the one that devises our life and devises our life plan, and then we play it out on our ego life. So that one of the concepts of the book is that when you learn to forgive, you got to understand that you're in many, they talk about looking at it from two visions, looking at it from the perspective of your inner self and also your personality self. And sometimes they don't always jive at that particular time. So a lot of times when the heart and soul of forgiveness, it's really understanding that there's nothing to forgive, that everything has been contracted on the inner self level, the inner soul level. So even though it plays out on the personality level of, oh, you slapped me, you hurt me, that's just on the personality level. On the soul level, it was all contracted for that to happen for the personality's level growth and expansion. So with that, I know everyone here understands it beautifully and understands the philosophy. I am going to throw a little wrench in here and have a little discussion here in that even with that concept, I'm going to say I have some very, very challenging issues for forgiveness, and I'll just give you one. And I use this book to process it. But at a very early age, before I had my first kiss, I was actually sexually assaulted by a police officer with this gun. And that was very hard and traumatic. And then when I went home that evening, that was not the worst of my problems. Facing my father was actually worse than being sexually assaulted by a policeman. So I'm just giving that example of there's very high level trauma and forgiveness that has to be processed there.
Right.
I have gotten to the point where I actually do forgive my father and the officer that sexually abused me, but I forgive their soul. I forgive their soul because I understand that they did that to incarnate for my life and have it play out my life. I do not forgive that personality self that sexually, and so I have not gotten. I can fall on my knees and appreciate the soul that came in and designed that. I cannot fall on my knees and have appreciation for that personality self that caused that trauma. I can forgive that personality self and say, ooh, I'm glad that element's not in my life. And I'm glad I don't have to face that immediate danger. And I understand how that personality self played a part in helping my personality self. But I can't really say that I love that personality self and want to be around that personality self, or for my mind, there's a difference between loving the soul that did it versus loving the personality. And definitely I can love the soul. I understand the big picture but I still can't get to the point of loving that personality.
Well,
I
I
can
think,
accept it
yeah,
and know that it happened, but yeah.
the one thing I would say is you don't have to condone the behavior. You don't have to keep the person in your life. That may mean that you need to walk away,
Yeah.
or, but, you know, forgiveness is really, on a spiritual level, is about just being willing to accept what happened.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily um, saying, walking to the person and saying, I love you. You know, I mean, one of the things that he suggested in the book was to write a letter to them and keep writing letters. But you don't mail them, you know. Um,
Yeah.
that, you know, there are very difficult things that happen in our life. And you know, that willingness to accept that your soul group came in, these personalities agreed to do certain things. Um, you know, because really it's the way you frame it, you know, but storing the unforgiveness in you. The entire book was created to help people with cancer who were holding on and refusing to accept their feelings. Like, and that was another discussion Vik and I had. I feel angry. I am very angry at this person who hit me, who, you know, was very difficult, who committed crimes. You know, he ended up having a difficult life. I mean, he's still here, but he never probably forgave himself either for all these things he did. And he cherished me and loved me. He still loves me, you know. You know, this is many years later. I refused to allow my son to be around this person that was abusive. But it doesn't mean that I condone his actions in any way. It mean, or, you know, or kept him in my life. But it does mean that I can send him love and appreciation because I played the victim role. And he talks a lot about the victim archetype in the, and I do believe that we come in, we kind of are programmed to be a victim, then we tell the victim story, and then at some point we let that go. So that willingness to know that you could handle what happened, you did handle it, and you grew from it. So appreciation is not necessarily for the person, it's for the experiences and for the growth and to becoming a creator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's interesting about the two characters that I mentioned, the police officer and my father, they're both deceased right now. And the police officer, I can honestly say I have not thought about that person in 30 years until I read this book and had to think of an example. And that's the time that it popped up. My father, though, I do think about every once in a while. And, you know, so it's ironic in that when you look at it objectively, I have processed the police officer 30 years ago. I mean, I really had not thought about that incident, and it doesn't bug me. It just doesn't bug me. When I think about my father, I'm still processing some of the trauma that he did to me, even though they're both past, you know. But it's interesting to see and know that I've processed the officer, but I haven't completely processed my father.
Right. Okay. Well, just the
Yeah.
willingness to work on it is, you know, but the forgiveness will come because it's done on a soul level, on a spiritual level. It's not, um, you know, but we're holding on to some of that anger, resentment, all these lower based emotions. And these things that we judge about other people, the mirror concept is in the book. So I want to talk about that a little bit. So the things that we see or feel, our fears and they call it our shadow self. So these are the anger, the frustration, anxiety, all the things that we created from all of the combined experiences we had. Maybe it was a difficult mom and dad. Maybe it was a difficult ex. Maybe it was a difficult, anything it is. These are the experience that shape our perceptions of the world and what causes, so that is what you're really trying to resonate and let go of at an energetic level. You want to let go of that out of your body, and blame and judgment. So we've talked about all these concepts. So what I'm judging in another, the bully, is also present in me, because I'm angry at the bully. And when a bully comes at you, your first reaction is to fight back, to argue, to disagree. But Vik is saying, let's turn that around and acknowledge and love your emotions. So it's okay to hate your dad. It's okay to yell at your kids. It's okay to feel angry. He even suggests doing physical movements like dance and yoga or working out, to let that go, because it's when you hold on to it, it creates illness within the body, disease. So, the entire book was written to help people that were hanging on to lower based emotions. So, and all these concepts I knew, it just put it in a succinct order. And I do love new tools. So you find the tools that work for you. And that might be yelling and screaming. It might be running, or it might be yoga. And I just really like the way that he does it. The idea of separation, he talks about that. Like, we're not really separate, we're all energy. So bringing it together, and I don't know if there were any concepts. Surrendering to what has happened, and the idea of separation. When I forgive it, let's say Christina and I had a disagreement. When I forgive Christina, it works like a miracle. When I forgive her and stop blaming her and take responsibility for my own emotions, then the energy of the relationship changes. It's like magic. The reason it changes is because you change. I no longer have to avoid Christina because we had a disagreement. I no longer have to interact with her unless I choose to. But it is a very powerful process, is what I'm saying. But it cleanses the energy in an alchemical process. When you turn those difficulties into the gold that taught you the lesson, but you've got to learn the lesson. If you didn't learn the lesson, I used to have a boss, and she'll say, the beatings will continue until you learn the lesson. So there's a lesson, a gift in every single difficult situation you've ever encountered in your whole life. And go ahead.
I just want to point out it also helps if you acknowledge that there is a very good chance that you planned all of this.
Yes.
This is your journey is entirely planned by you. And a lot of people, like I initially struggled with this idea because in victimhood, one of the things I'm not going to talk about all this, I used to think about was like, I have been put here against my will. If spirituality is real, if all of this stuff is real, then I cannot be here on my own volition. I have been forced to be here. Coming to the realization that that's not true I am here by my own choice,
That's right.
and this journey has been unfolding exactly as I had planned, just opens up a whole new way of looking at your life. And that's it, kind of makes the reframing easier. I would say that
Yes,
the reframing becomes a lot easier when you start looking at your life and your experiences from the perspective of the creator as opposed to the perspective of the victim.
that's right.
Vic,
So
read
that
the book
helps.
of Your Soul's Plan by Robert Schwartz. It's one of my 10 all-time favorite books. But on
What
this
is it
topic,
called?
it's Robert Schwartz, Your Soul's Gift. It
Okay.
handles this topic the most beautiful way and will give you the clarity that, it's just one of my all-time favorite books. So
But
once you read that book, you will understand everything about Soul Plan and how beautiful it is on all their incentives to
yeah,
incarnate in harsh situations. It's
yeah,
it's perfect. It's perfect. Um,
it's
I would like to ask
good.
Christina, because Christina actually elevated it to the point of falling down on her knees in appreciation, and Joshua has also mentioned that. And I think very few people have gotten it to that stage of falling down on their knees and appreciate. I think they get to the stage where I get to, where it's like, okay, I know it's, my higher good. Okay, I can accept it. I process it. Okay, bye, like that. But Christina has fell down to her knees in appreciation. And I know Gary has too, from Joshua. So I would like to hear a bit about that, because I did not accomplish that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's yeah, great question. Because I've been as we've been talking, how you mentioned that, like, on a soul level you can have the appreciation, but like you're still with having difficulty with the personality self. And for me, like, I think Tami kind of touched on this too. It's like I can be in acceptance of my father's personality for the role that he played, because it gave me that higher clarity and that higher understanding. Like his personality self served the role that I needed in order for me to come to a greater awakening.
Yes,
So for me, it was like, oh my God, I can have appreciation for the personality that he played, even though maybe I don't like it, or like it's, it could be perceived as bad, or, um, you know, we could judge it, but I actually can have love for it now, even if it's not necessarily the personality self that, like, maybe I would agree with from a human perspective, but from a soul perspective, thank you, Father, for being that, and like having that personality that you did, so that I could have this greater awakening. And also, kind of like what Vik said, it's like you have to come from it from a perspective that you created your reality, right? Like you are creating all these players in your life, and I created, I had this soul contract with my father for him to play this role. Suffering is for me, and like, and even so, and I feel like when him and I have interactions now, I don't need him to change. I don't need him to be someone different. I can love him for who he is, even in his personality self. I'm not as triggered anymore. I can just be in acceptance of, like, hey, it's okay. Like, this doesn't have to upset me like it used to, because I know from a higher perspective the role that you have played for me. And I can have gratitude for that and remember that. And it's like having that moment of epiphany. It was like my body, I was overwhelmed with emotion, overwhelmed with this knowing of like this higher perspective, like from a soul level, like I could just feel the love from him, even though his personality self doesn't know how to show that.
yeah,
Like we think that it has to look a certain way, love is supposed to be a certain way, but like his personality for who he's been for me is love.
yes,
It is. And that's, I think, the epiphany that I had was like, wow, that's he loves me so deeply that he played this role. And also the other thing was that we talk about feeling a victim. The perpetrators feel like victims in their story, right? Like they also feel like my father has a deep sense of victim, even though I think he's the perpetrator.
Mm-hmm.
But he's really the one who really feels like life has screwed him and that he's got to, act in certain ways and be overpowering and all this stuff in order to overcome this deep, deep, deep sense of insecurity. So, and I can have so much compassion for that now, and I don't, where it doesn't trigger me in the way that it used to. And even in the times that like maybe him and I have conversations and maybe says something where I would remember like, oh, this used to upset me, but I can come back to this realization of this experience that I had of when I really dropped to my knees in appreciation, and could feel the love from him on a soul level.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember that moment and bring that to the present moment. But I guess like when you ask, like, how did I get to that place? It was a lot. I mean, I've been doing a decade of work around my father, like intentionally.
Mm-hmm.
And I really, like, I was just, a lot of it was intellectual. And I know he would, he's giving me my soul lessons and everything. But I guess like there was something in me that I was so intently wanting to truly know this on like a visceral level. Like I really had a strong intent. Like I was so tired of the patterns that I was recreating in relationships. I was so tired of the negative feeling I was having towards my father that it was causing me suffering.
Yes.
And I was tired of that feeling that it was causing me. And so I deeply, deeply wanted a change. And so I was actively seeking it and praying about it, intending like, God, angels, spirit, like, please help me, show me, because I no longer want to be feeling this way and projecting this into my relationships and feeling this about my father. This isn't serving me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I had done a lot of work. Most, like, my first few years of boot camp was all around my father and my relationships.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was a lot of stuff. And so it finally got to the point where I just had a really, really strong intent, a really powerful intent. And I feel like it finally hit me.
Okay, so my question to Christina, Vik, and Tami is that it's true exactly what you said, but why do you just pick your father? Is it because of the intensity, or are you supposed to fall down to your knees in appreciation for everyone? Because what we described there is true of every soul on every single interaction that you're having with. So on that level, if you're going to take that philosophy, you should fall down to your knees for that person who robbed you. You should fall down on your knees for anyone who's given you any trauma. So can you guys discuss that? Because I'm completely curious.
What I would add is that I think perhaps our feminine energy is easier for us to feel all of our emotions and accept them. So, I've done a lot of work in the past, and I have had no animosity for him for many years, and not many interactions, but a few through the years, because we had a child together, and I just wanted to be sure. I tried to select 3 areas because I was doing it this week and we were getting together. I want to see how this form works. I could see where I had gotten to a specific level. And, I already had love and appreciation for, like, I'm so grateful about our child. We had fun together, even though it wasn't all fun, there was fun, so it was a shift to the emotion of neutrality for me, not necessarily crying, getting on my knees, but I have done that work in the past. So I have felt that way. Christina just maybe feels that emotion because she finally accepted something in herself, probably.
Yeah.
She finally realized that she could. I think if you do the work, you will get all the way to self-appreciation. And that's where I got. I had that in some areas, but there you still have limiting beliefs. You still have the idea of separation because we live in a human world. We still have human emotions. Um, I feel all of the range of emotions, and love is not the only one, so I've got to accept that I love myself. I mean, it's all you. And so, he's just one of the areas that taught me about victimhood. And I went deep in
Yeah.
a deep dive for it. And now I appreciate it because when I was working with people who were in that, I couldn't fall apart. I had to be strong. I had to be a strong mother. I protected my child. I helped other women get out of this situation in my work. And, and now I use it when I see people, my grandkids or lots of people. My girlfriend, I was talking to her Friday night and she told me about three victim stories in a row. And, and she's kind of spiritual too, but she's not, I don't think she's done the work like me, but I'm saying I looked at her and I suggested the book. I said, perhaps you would read this book. She just went through a breakup and she was doing something very victim-y, and I suggested that she work on forgiveness because really she created all of this in her life, and I could see it playing out, and I could see the way it was going to play out before it even ended. And I didn't fall in it with her and say, oh, yeah, the guy's terrible and blah, 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 blah. I could see his value. So this tool is in the book too. All right, let's just say if you're going through a big event, like perhaps a breakup, the 4 steps to forgiveness, you might not have time to do the forms or do the work, but you're really supposed to begin to use these tools right here and now with whatever triggers you. So whatever triggered you this week, you just look at it and you say to yourself, you take responsibility. I created this. Number 1, look what I created. Number 2 is I notice my judgment. I'm judging this is bad and wrong, and I love myself anyway. I'm willing to see the perfection in the situation, and I surrender to the divine plan. Stop fighting against what's happening and just be present in the moment. And then I choose the power of peace. Maybe take a few deep breaths. So that's this 4-step process. And then if you want to add the next step, I see the Christ in Christina. I see the Christ in me. So I take everything to the nth degree when it comes to energy, when it comes to feeling emotions, but really peace is where you want to get to. Yeah, I'm at peace with everything I've ever done. I'm at peace. When I look in Christina's eyes, I see the beauty. When I look at Vik, I see the perfection. When I look at you, I see the perfection. And then what's mirrored back to me is the perfection of humans. That's living in heaven on earth. So you can deliberately create that by letting go of some of this past and being present in the moment. So that tool is great. The other tool that I loved in the book was the rose. I used that. So let's just say I'll give you a good example. It happened today. My husband was upset. He's off today, and his new boss, who knows nothing, is calling him on his day off to do something that he doesn't do for his job. And they're expecting him to do something that is not part of his job. Well, I'll just say that. So he was in there and he was a little upset, and I put a rose between us. I just imagined the rose. This is in the book, uh, a rose between us. I let his anger pour out onto the rose, but it didn't come to me. And then I agreed with him. I let him ramble, and I said, "What the fuck? The fucking fuck." I made a joke, and then he cursed a little bit, and then it just dissolved. So I didn't go into the suffering with him. I made a joke because really it was kind of funny. Now I could have got upset. I could have got mad. I could have felt that energy coming at me, because we are sensitive. But I'm done with being too sensitive for the world. I just put a rose in between us and say, "Hey, I love you anyway." Ramble, get mad, get upset, uh, whatever you want to do, because he's perfect just the way he is. I don't need to change him. I just make a joke and let it go. And I've had to forgive him for a lot of things that I perceived he did to me as a victim. Now I just know, oh, I created him. He's been one of my greatest teachers. And this relationship has brought me very much joy, love, some sorrow, some sadness, some manifestation events. But, you know, I'm the one who chose him, and he chose me. So we're in it together, and I surrender to it and I accept it, and I try to be flexible. So being flexible is part of it. Um, the other thing that I liked, and I am all about magic, so I love this ceremony. So I did a self-acceptance form, because he's got 3 different forms. If you go to the Sounds True website, and you can download the forms. And then
Yeah.
I did a ceremony. I set the intention to totally accept myself. And then I did a little fire. He recommends using the elements: fire, air, water. I speak some self-acceptance into my water, because we're water. We we're the earth. And so think about writing a list of your grievances and burning it. If there's something about yourself that you don't accept, it's time to let it go, because really you are who you are, and you're going to be who you're going to be. And you can choose to be love and live in peace, or you can choose to be upset all the time. So which is easier?
I I do want to say that what I experienced as I was working on these forms is that new memories are unlocked. There were these memories that I had completely forgotten, pushed in a corner, not looking at, but now I was looking at these memories, and and it made me realize the impact that the bully situation had on me and how I have conducted myself in my life after that incident. Because if you've read, so in the last chapter of the book, he talks about one of the shootings that has happened in our country here in the 90s, one of the school shootings that had happened, well, the biggest one. And he talks about how he did this form to find forgiveness for the kids who did the shooting. And, you know, I was looking, so of course, you know, I had heard about the shooting before. I mean, we've all at some points heard about it. But I started looking into it, and one of the things that I saw is like the kids who did the shooting were victims of bullying,
Mhm, mhm.
and they had a lot of hate and anger, especially against women.
Ahaha.
A lot of anger against women. Like the
Mhm,
journals that they wrote about how they feel rejected and how they wanted to do all of these things that they did to women, and especially to women. And it got me thinking about it. When this bullying happened to me, the immediate result of the bullying was that I was completely ostracized. I remember hearing girls in my class telling others, hey, we should probably not talk to this guy anymore. He's not like, let's just avoid him. He's not, don't get involved with this guy. Like, I've literally heard that from women. I never got to a point where I hated or resented women. I, in fact, have had very healthy relationships with women even after that episode. And that was 2 years of that. So that was a lot. And I do remember feeling angry. I do remember being very upset. And as I said, all of these new memories were being unlocked. But at no point could I ever I could remember being mad at a whole section of society because of what happened to me. It wasn't that. And this is where I felt it's almost like I felt sort of a reverence for this guy, the bully, because he showed me an aspect of me that I hadn't seen so far.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is who I am. This is, talk about, like, Tami and I were talking about this last week, where I asked Tami, how do I learn to express my power in alignment with love? This made me realize I had already been doing that. I just didn't know it. I was already expressing my power by being who I was. I didn't go into hate mode. I didn't go into this mode of like anger and resentment where I want to take it out on the society or take it out on people or do anything. None of that stuff happened. None of that stuff happened with me. And I mean, in spite of the bullying that I experienced, my it's almost like this is who I am. I choose not to be angry on a whole section of society because of what happened to me. I chose not to take it out on people. I chose not to make lives miserable. None of that stuff. I chose to stay in alignment with love without knowing that. And that is the reframing story that I came up with. This is the higher perspective I came up with once I finished the form. And the way, how Christina was talking about her reaction, the way I closed this was, there was this visual that came in my head where I am in my mind where I am standing in front of the bully, the guy who bullied me, and both of us are just joining our hands like this and bowing to each other in reverence. In reverence. Like,
See?
thank you.
Thank you.
I don't have to love him. I don't have to appreciate him. I mean, I appreciate, yes, but I don't have to love I don't have to bring myself to love him. I know my soul already reveres this guy's soul. And I know that his soul reveres mine. So it's okay. Maybe this is where our entanglement in the physical plane is done with. Thank you so much for playing the role that you played in my life. I appreciate you for what you did and for what you made me see about myself. I would have not seen this aspect of me, even if it came 20 years after that happened. I would probably not have seen this aspect of me if it wasn't for you. So thank you. And that's it. I don't have to bring myself to love the guy. I don't have to start to reach out to him on social media like, hey, dude, how's it going? Let's hang out sometime. Nothing of that sort. I didn't feel like doing any of that sort. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's it. Like I didn't reach out to him or neither. I mean, understand that, the energy, the positive energy, once you let go of, I really think it boils down to self-hatred. You know, the opposite of self-hatred. Like I think or maybe I chose to kind of self-punish myself when I wasn't always right or doing, or maybe I considered doing something bad. I was good most of the time. And yet difficult things happen in my life, and some of them I accepted and some I did not. Um, so I let that go, but it's diffusing hatred, you know, and getting back to unity, um, love, so you said a powerful intention. I wrote that intention down. The power of love is a million times more powerful than hatred. And then internalize that, you know. So, you know, there's some core limiting beliefs that perhaps you were programmed to believe or accepted at a very young age. Now, I would suggest going back to some maybe events that happened when you were very young. And also, oh, the ego one. I really liked the ego death ceremony, and that one was kind of good. So I did that one too. I tried them all out to see what I like, because I think it's just because I like to play games and use my imagination. So I envisioned myself as a very young girl. I was a victim, and then you create the burial, and you bury it, and you you bury that. I call it T baby, when she wants to pitch a fit and hold her breath or get her way, then I just put her in that coffin and buried her and walked away in peace. So I tried that too. Um, and that one was really good. So think about using some of these ideas in the book creatively, um, working on self-acceptance and self-love, and then spreading it out to the world. So, does anybody else want to add anything?
Yeah, I just want to add real quickly, like this whole experience that I've had around my father, I've never actually shared with him. Like I didn't this is not something that he's aware of at all. And it's not about him knowing it either, because
Mm,
this was my soul's growth.
yeah.
And you like you talk about like the limiting beliefs, like I used to think that he was the one that gave me these, and so I was so upset with him, but now I realize that without him I wouldn't have come to this greater understanding of, you know, being this spiritual being and this human experience. How strongly I've sought out these kind of teachings, and
Mhm,
it's because of these beliefs, and it's because of the role that he has played. And so,
mhm.
you know, for me, this was all for me. You know, this was for my greater understanding, my greater awakening, and my greater love. And I can have appreciation for him, and for myself, right? And for the journey that I chose for myself. Like I chose this, right? Like that's the aspect too. That's like empower yourself to remember that like this is you chose all of this, and all these people are here for you, and they're all serving you for your greater good.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you all for being here today and for being vulnerable, for sharing your stories. Um, you know, it takes work. Some of us love to do the work. I'm one of them, I'll admit it. And I chose all of you to be in my reality, and I'm grateful. I've learned lessons from each of you in different ways, and I hope to see you again soon.
Thank you, Tami.
Yeah.
We love you.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Tammy. Thank you for the
Thank
invitation.
you. Yep.